Good evening. That breaking news. Angela Rayner used £160,000 from a trust set up to care for her disabled son to buy the £800,000 seafront flat at the centre of a monumental sleaze inquiry. Angela Rayner has to go. And if she won't go, Sir Keir Starmer has to sack her. Angela Rayner today admitted that she didn't pay enough stamp duty on her second home.
I have alerted and referred myself to the independent advisor on the ministerial code to ensure that they can look transparently at what's happened, and also contacted HMRC to say that there is additional tax owing on this and that I'm prepared to pay that and fully comply with the HMRC as well.
Here is Sir Keir Starmer when he was leader of the opposition.
Does the Prime Minister agree that any politician who seeks to avoid the taxes they owe in this country is not fit to be in charge of taxpayer money?
Here he is again.
So whilst they're asking other people to pay more in tax, they seem to be involved in schemes to keep their own tax down, and this is now a pattern of behaviour. What I want from the Prime Minister is an assurance as to whether other members of the Cabinet have been using these schemes to reduce their tax.
Yeah, gosh. I mean, I know how you feel. There's no two ways about it. Angela Rayner has misbehaved, hasn't she? Well, what did the Prime Minister say he'd do if someone misbehaved?
Mr. Speaker, here's the difference. When somebody in my party misbehaves, I kick them out.
Well, he hasn't kicked Miss Rayner out. In fact, today, he said he was really proud of her.
But I can be clear, I am very proud to sit alongside a Deputy Prime Minister who is building 1.5 million homes, who is bringing the biggest upgrade to workers' rights in a generation, and who's come from a working-class background to be Deputy Prime Minister of this country.
I do wonder what people of a working-class background would make of the new reports that Angela Rayner used her disabled son's NHS compensation to buy a second home. I mean, it's quite astonishing, that, really. But let's be fair to Angela Rayner. Here is what she claims happened.
Advice that I relied upon didn't pick that up. The leading tax council, who has subsequently looked at it, has gone into that and has said that actually because of that, it did remain my sole property. And the trust wasn't set up, as accusations have been made, for me to try and flip or dodge tax or anything of that nature. No, the trust was set up by a court to provide for my son after an injury.
OK, all right. Well, very, very sorry, obviously, about her son's issue. When Dominic Cummings was Boris Johnson's chief in Downing Street and he claimed that he went off back to the North East for the sake of his kids' health, Sir Keir Starmer was ruthless.
The government's argument is that Dominic Cummings was doing what was right for his family to make sure that his child had appropriate childcare if he fell ill. Is that not a reasonable excuse? Would you do the same?
That's not a reasonable interpretation of the rules, and the Prime Minister knows it. And millions of people have not done the same. That's why this is such an important issue. Millions haven't done that, and he has done it. One rule for the Prime Minister's advisers, another rule for everybody else.
He actually went even further than that. Let's have a look at this.
If I were Prime Minister, I'd have sacked Cummings.
All right. Well, in fact, he's always called for Prime Ministers to sack members of their cabinet if they do wrong, slagging off Boris Johnson for not sacking Dominic Raab.
Raab said, depending on the findings of the report, he would resign. He has now resigned. He's done the right thing, hasn't he?
Well, the big question for the Prime Minister is why he was so weak to appoint him in the first place. The second question for the Prime Minister is why he didn't sack him. And now it's left to Dominic Raab to resign, and the Prime Minister hasn't acted. And it's that indecision, it's that weakness, I think, that goes to the heart, not just of this Prime Minister, but of 13 years now of failure.
The left are savage, they are brutal, they are merciless. If someone messes up, they want them sacked, gone, unemployed, cancelled. They should never work again. They should live in disgrace. When Boris Johnson quit, Angela Rayner herself was all over the news, slagging him off on the way out.
I think it's an absolute disgrace and, you know, good riddance. He shouldn't have been in Parliament in the first place. A man like that has no business being anywhere near the Prime Minister's office.
Angela Rayner has repeatedly posted on social media talking about how it's one rule for those in power and one rule for everybody else. She's done it loads and loads and loads of times. In fact, she's actually said it out loud.
There's one rule for them and one rule for all of us.
Quite. Well, she said that tax avoidance costs lives. She claims that she had incorrect legal advice. Well, that may be so, but come on then, let's see it. Where is it? Look at the number the establishment media are trying to do on this. She did a cosy little interview with her friend Beth Rigby at Sky News, who then went on telly and told everyone how emotional Miss Rayner was.
You could see a Deputy Prime Minister, normally extremely robust. Angela Rayner in that interview visibly upset, holding back the tears as she talked about her family arrangements.
Right, well, boo-hoo. The fact is, Labour are asking us to be much kinder to them and Angela Rayner than they have ever been about anyone else. So they can swivel as far as I'm concerned. I'm afraid that Angela Rayner is getting a taste now of her own medicine. Goodbye.
Using the internet without a VPN, a virtual private network, is a bit like taking to the road without car insurance. All it takes is one unlucky moment to cost you a lot of cash. This video's sponsor is Private Internet Access. They are the VPN to help keep you safe. Click the link in the description below to find out why over 30 million people have downloaded PIA to protect themselves online. A virtual private network is an app that hides your IP address and helps keep your data private. When you're browsing the internet at home, you give up a large amount of data to businesses, to shops, and indeed to social media giants too. Hackers have the ability to steal your personal data with ease, including sensitive information such as passwords, keystrokes, and even your personal photos. Private Internet Access helps protect your personal data by encrypting your internet connection to keep your data out of the hands of cyber criminals. And it's not just hackers either to be concerned about. Information can be censored too. When Canada passed their C18 bill, social media giants decided to ban news content on their platforms. But PIA can protect your ability to consume the news and content you love. Private Internet Access is available for Windows users, Mac OS, Android, Linux, iOS, and you can use one PIA subscription to protect an unlimited amount of devices. And we've got a huge GBNews discount for you too. Click the link in this video's description and you'll get a massive 83% off PIA. That's under £2 a month, the price of a coffee, and you'll get an extra 4 months completely free on top. Also, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee too. Visit piavpn.com/GBnews to start protecting yourself digitally today.
Right, let's get the views of my panel on this. We have got the Director of Popular Conservatives, Mark Littlewood. We've got Reform Councillor Jamie McIver, and we've got broadcaster and journalist Nina Mishkov. Mark, you've just seen there a procession of different clips where Sir Keir Starmer has called for people to be sacked or to resign for stuff just like this.
Yeah, I mean, if you live on the moral high horse, you die on the moral high horse, don't you? And it was a key feature of the last election campaign as well, that probity and ethics and public service in public life was going to be a major difference between the Tories and the incoming Labour government. And I mean, I think that's a bit too puritanical a platform. My own view is that mistakes can happen in tax, which are not intended, because we've got the most complicated tax system on planet Earth. That's my own view. So I tend to wait until I've seen some of the facts, at least, before I try and reach a conclusion. But it was not the view of Angela Rayner and Keir Starmer, who, as you rightly say, were ruthless about demanding the resignation of Conservatives for what might have been clerical errors or a misunderstanding. And I think they should therefore expect no mercy from journalists, from opposition politicians, or from the general public when this happens to them. No mercy at all.
Jamie, these revelations as well that came out, like I said, just as I walked through the door to the studio at 9 p.m, we've already spoken a bit about them. 160 grand from a trust set up to care for a disabled son. All of that. She's got to go, hasn't she?
I think it's almost impossible for her to recover from this. But the recent revelations, what I keep questioning here is, why did she need money from the trust in the first place? 'Cause it's not really her trust. It's obviously to do with something very awful that happened. So therefore, that money surely is there to safeguard her son's future for life. Perhaps a scenario perhaps where that child doesn't have a mum and a dad anymore. No, that trust lives with the child for a long time. And so I don't understand why she has a very good job, why she's not able to sort herself out with a property, not touching the trust. And also what I don't quite understand, and I've made this point earlier, is what the obsession is with owning a home on the south coast of England when you're a member of parliament in the north. That I just don't understand. In fact, I would love to see how the Labour Party would treat a member of parliament at election time who has a residence on the south coast when they're a Tory MP or a Reform MP in the north. Can you imagine the hysteria? Look what they say about Nigel in Clacton.
Well, that's it. We've had a flavour of that. I mean, I'm by the way, waiting to see the Led by Donkeys poster on all of this. Where are they? Are they going to be beaming something up on the side of one of Angela Rayner's homes? Are they about this? Are we going to see a poster in Ashton Underline? Where is Rayner? Where did the money come from? But Nina, do you have more sympathy for her than us?
Yes, of course I do. Of course I do. Because, you know, this is being twisted. The sharks are circling, there's blood in the water, and so she's been made to be this grasping woman who's taken money from the mouth of her disabled son. That is not the situation, as I see it. It is not the situation. She co-owned a property in the north, OK, with her husband. The trust was set up to look after her disabled son. Now, 50% of that has already been sold, OK? So the trust owns 3/4. They own 75% of this house now because she's just sold her portion of it. She's perfectly entitled to sell. That is her property and her savings and her, you know...
Well, technically it's her son's. Is it
No. This is her property.
OK.
Nina's got a point. I mean, what she appears to have done is to sell her son's trust a slice of property.
Yes.
She hasn't just sort of taken and grabbed money.
No, thank you.
So there's £160,000, there or thereabouts, was paid by her son's trust to her in return for 25% equity in this property. Now, the only question there, when I can't comment on what the answer might be, is it clearly in her son's interests to own 75% of a property in Ashton Underline rather than 50% of a property in Ashton Underline? Was that definitely done in the clear interests of the son, or was the transaction done in order to release money such that Angela Rayner could put down a deposit on a property in Hove? That's the question.
Well,
I don't know the answer to that.
I would say, presumably, ultimately, the trust will hold 100% of the property for the son, because after Angela Rayner goes and her ex-husband goes, the trust will have to administer that.
Will be about his care needs more than
but presumably, this is kind of the implication that by doing this, she's somehow preventing him from getting the care that he needs. You're saying that
I think it's going to be quite tricky for Angela Rayner to argue that her son's needs are better served by her having a new property 200 miles away from him. That's something she's...
To be honest, I think the selling issue isn't an issue. You own something, you want to sell it, that's fine. People do it all the time. I think the issue is, as Margaret's already said, is it within the best interest of the trust and her son to own more stake in the property? Because as far as I can see, she owned that property.
But why shouldn't the trust...
But what about, all the time Sir Keir Starmer has called for people to be sacked, called for Prime Ministers to show leadership and sack someone.
Absolutely right. Called for Boris Johnson to go, and whatever she said about Boris Johnson was absolutely right. He should have been nowhere near this number 10 Downing Street. So that's perfectly right.
But what happens now, though? Because she said tax avoidance costs lives, so she costs lives by her own standard. Sir Keir Starmer, should we bring up the Telegraph front page? Is that right? It's just landed, so we know the story landed earlier on, but we didn't have their actual physical copy of the front page. I didn't pay the right tax, but it's still not my fault, says Angela Rayner. So there you go. But you know, we are now in a situation where everything that Sir Keir Starmer said about previous Tory cabinet ministers is happening in his own cabinet with his deputy prime minister.
Yes, but once he was talking about the Tories were actually doing things because they wanted to, because they were making it, gouging out profit.
Hang on one second.
Come on, a lot of them were. Look at Boris Johnson lying left, right and centre.
Let's take
I don't think she hasn't done this deliberately.
Let's take the case of Nadeem Zahawi, who was the chairman of the Conservative Party and had some very complicated tax issues. Before they were investigated, before he was found guilty of anything, before it was referred to any ethics committee, Angela Rayner was quite clear he had to resign. He had to go. Not that we needed to wait to get to the bottom of the story. Not that there were questions to be answered. He had to resign.
This was a man who should. This was a man who should have known absolutely what his tax affairs were. So what?
I tell you what I
This
think.
is ridiculous.
Tories are supposed to know more than Labour.
I tell you what I think.
Because of his job.
This just proves how bad the Labour Party is and the Tory Party is, because they can't talk about policy. They have to dig into people's lives. That's the problem.
Okay, all right, look, well, Angela Rayner has expressed regret for the error, explaining it stemmed from misguided legal advice relating to a trust set up for her disabled son. She has emphasised that her choices were guided by the interests of her family. She's referred herself to the Prime Minister's independent ethics advisor and is cooperating fully with HMRC to settle any additional tax due. That's where we are. Now, before I take you to Nigel Farage getting stuck in to everything stateside about freedom of speech, hey, tell you what, if you're short a few quid or, I don't know, maybe you're about to be unemployed,